Hey everybody, this is Brett. I just want to jump in here and put this lesson together for this old barn that I painted. So this is a close-up of what we're doing and what our final is going to look like so that we can kind of see it. So starting here with a canvas, I've got a 16 by 20 canvas, and the first thing I want to do is I'm going to select this blue that is over here. Try and find a nice, kind of a happy sky blue. I want this to be a brighter painting. And so then just go into the fill bucket here, and you can do that by pressing F. And now I've got a really nice blue background. And I want to put in some of those clouds like you see with the cotton ball kind of clouds. So I'm going to grab not quite a white, but just a real kind of blue, light blue color there. And I want to paint them in. So there's a couple different brushes that we can use and do. I'm using this one that I just made. This is, it's a soft cloud brush, Impressionistic brush is how I named it. And it's designed to really paint these kind of puffy clouds like you see here, and it builds it up kind of automatically, putting in some of the variations of the colors. And so I'm just going to keep building that up right here and kind of, just putting in a rough shape of a cloud and again, going for those kind of cotton ball looking type clouds. And so it's interacting with the blue underneath it, so I need a new layer here so I can start adding in different colors for highlights and shadows. So that's one thing about this brush, it does interact with the paint underneath it fairly a good amount. So just want to lay in some highlights and kind of get a feel for the direction that it's coming. I'm thinking the direction of the light's going to be coming from the upper left, and trying to play around with that. And now that I've got it, what I've done right here is I'm just going to switch over to this palette knife, and I'm going to just kind of go with the heavy blurred frosting like I do with the majority of my clouds anyway, is put this here and then blend it so that it fades into the layer below and becomes a little bit softer. Because again, I don't want really the harsh lighting and the strong lighting that you normally would see in some of my other paintings. I want the clouds to really be just part of the background, and I don't want to have a whole lot of attention pulled to them. So I'm just going to keep putting these in here and playing around with it. And so when you're doing this yourself, and this is the brush I just want to show you real quick. So that's the brush I've got. And I'm going to be sending these out, but if you look here under artistic, you can use really any of these to start out with this. And like these ones right here work really well. I'm going to stick with this one because I like it, and I've made it specifically for this purpose. I will have these coming out soon. They'll probably be on Gumroad, but I'm going to more than likely give all of you a really significant discount on these brushes, because I'm putting together a rather large brush set for doing it. But I know that some people are tight on cash and stuff right now, so I'm going to make this as affordable as possible for all of you, so that way you can play around with it. But again, like I've said before, don't get so much hung up on the brush itself. The brush isn't magic. It's not going to make everything suddenly work. It just takes practice to make this stuff work. And so once you get the practice down, you start understanding it, then the brush is just kind of help simplify some of the process. So again, trying to lay in some highlight and get a feel for the direction of the lighting as it's coming in. So I'm going to put it a little bit here. This is brighter, much brighter than the one above it. So I'll fade it down a little bit and kind of blend it in like this. And so it kind of softens it in. But you see how this brush is designed. And again, those canvas brushes would work just as well. Just take a little bit more softening with the palette knife. But this is designed to really give you that puffy cloud kind of look, and the ones that you love flying in an airplane over. So, and you can use it for the highlights. You can use it for shadows. You can use it to really soften in. But any of these brushes will do it. So just trying to play around a little bit here and get it softened in with it. So yeah, so you can kind of see this is what it's starting to look like with that. So let me just kind of take a look back at it. Let's see. All right, select a little bit of this color here. Lay in some more paint on here because I'm going to do my shadows next, I think. So for the shadows, I need kind of this darker bluish gray right here. Because again, I don't want these to be real bold, because honestly, a lot of it's going to be covered up by the barn and stuff that we're painting. So, so I just want to, but I want to soften it out and give it a little bit of definition and a little bit of a feeling for it. So you can see I've got 3 layers here so far. Part of that is because it allows me to go back and paint in and around the clouds like so. And so I can really kind of get a feel for, this is on the wrong there, let me switch, pushing the lights and the darks. So again, one of the advantages of using digital paint. Okay, so just going to keep painting in this and getting a feel for it. And really just spending a little bit more time here. And again, you know, like I've said a couple times now, these clouds are not the main focus. It's really right now I'm just kind of practicing some of the clouds and putting in some of the highlights and stuff, because these are going to be in the background. But it's never a bad thing to paint it and get it kind of a finished look, because if you think about it from a traditional standpoint, if I was going to paint over top of these, I need to get these to a somewhat finished look, so I don't have to go in and paint around the other stuff that I'm going to be doing. And even that's, you know, to a point, that's the same with digital. I mean, yes, you can go between the layers, but I don't like to build up a huge amount of layers. So when I can, I'm going to merge them down like this and then get it set. So now I've got them merged down into one layer. And so a couple different things for this. Now, Artrage, one of the problems with Artrage is that Artrage is very memory heavy. So it will cause you to have some lag issues if you're using custom brushes, because remember, it's stamping that same image over and over and over to make that custom brush. So you're going to have some lag issues. If you reduce your layers down, you'll have less. Okay, so let me switch to the tool here while I'm talking and do this. So I'm just going to rough in where the background is going to go in my horizon line. So anyway, if you can reduce your layers, that's less memory that it has to have, because it's trying to really pull in the layers and calculate where they go and everything else. So what I'm doing here is just really setting in for where I want my horizon, and just taking one of the brushes. Again, I've got one of my new custom brushes that I'm using. This honestly can be any brush. This literally can be anything, because I'm just blocking in color, but I wanted a little bit of variation for it. So that's why I'm putting it in like this. So I'm just going to keep kind of scrubbing this in and changing the variation of it. Okay, so once I've got this put in here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch. There's a custom brush that's called Vertical Trees that I use. And again, you could use, if you don't have that one, anything will work. What I'm doing right here is just breaking up this harsh line that's in the background and trying to give some variation. And this brush it's a set of vertical tree shapes that I made and created a brush from. And so that really works for doing this. And so this is kind of the first pass at roughing up this background. And again, most of this, honestly, again, is going to be hidden by other trees, by foreground. So it's really just practice to kind of get a feel for making things look more organic. Excuse me. So I'm just going to keep scrubbing these in here and getting this kind of done up, and then do a few other things to try and play around with the structure and so forth. Also, one thing to note is that I've went to a little bit lighter green here, and so I'm trying to really again, start laying in the foundation for variation in color as well as texture. So that way it really gives a lot more interest as we're going along with stuff. So once I've got this in, again, no real definition, just kind of a rough shape. I want to change this up a little bit, so I think I'm going to use one of my stencils to kind of lay in some other tree kind of shapes, because again, with impressionistic painting, even if you're trying to paint somewhat realistic and impressionistic, it's just the hint, the impression of the shapes that you need. So that's what I'm going to do here, and it's just a little bit more. I could use that vertical brush that I was using before, but I just want to give a little bit more variation to what I'm doing. So let me get a smaller brush here, change the color just slightly, and put it in here. And let's see. Okay. Maybe go just a little darker. And try to change it some up down here. I'm kind of going over my stencil here. So I'll just kind of fade this in a little bit by switching over here to our trusty old palette knife. And just kind of fade it back. Because again, I'm not so much going for detail, I'm just trying to give your idea a hint of what's going on with it. And can really see. So, alright. So I think that's good for that part. And let's see. So for this other part, well, I think this gives us enough. So let's do this next layer. I'm going to try and get the barn laid out. And so you can use the pencil tool, you can use the pen tool, marker tool, whatever. I'm going to go with the pen, and I'm going to draw in the rough shape of my barn, so that I can kind of get a quick idea of the perspective and everything else. So really thinking about where I want it to be, how I want it to be. I know I want it to be not quite center, but just a little off from center. So maybe right about in here. Now, if you hold control like I'm doing right now and pull, you'll pull a straight line. Now that will always give you the full size of the brush. Okay, so if it's a 3%, it's going to be a straight 3% line. So really just shape this out. If you're not good with perspective, this actually can help quite a bit because it's giving you the straight lines, and just trying to get it done in. Now with an old barn like this, honestly, your perspective can be off slightly because the barn could be twisted and leaning and falling apart. So I've got kind of this rough shape that I want here. So I just need to fade this off into the background like so. The key to this is you want to do shift control for your vertical lines, because that'll give you a straight up and down line, which is going to help make that perspective a little bit more believable. So and then from there, it's just really a matter of trying to figure out making it look right, like so. And it's just a simple shape. You don't need anything crazy. This is, can't really get much more simple than this. It's basically a couple of rectangles and a triangle. So now we've got that laid out and know where it's going to go on this layer. From here, it's just going to be a matter of drawing in some color and laying it out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select it using the selection tool here, and just kind of selecting the straight lines. I forget what this one's called, but it's the you'll see right there in the middle, the one I selected, but it lets you do the straight lines. So basically almost like you just did with the pen tool. You can actually just draw it with this and select your shape like so. So now I've got this done here. Now what I want to do is I'm going to switch over, and I could just fill this, but instead what I'm going to use one of the custom brushes, and I'm going to use, let me switch here real quick. Let's see, find the one soft brush that I want to use. This is again one of my ones that I have. It's just a streaky soft brush. Now because that black line is there and I'm going up and down, and those canvas brushes would work perfect for this, it's going to grab some of that ink and smear it And by going vertical like this and just back and forth with a rough brush, it's going to start giving me that underpainting for the old barnwood. And so I've already laid in a really good base layer for this old gray barnwood that I want to have. And didn't really do a whole lot to do this. So just use one of those rough brushes, vertical strokes, and you'll get a similar look to it as well. But it's really nice way to do it. You want to go with just a soft gray, kind of a bluish gray. And then what I'm doing here is just kind of pulling in some extra streaks for where I want the lights and the shadows to kind of start hitting. So now most of these custom brushes do pick up paint underneath, so they're going to be, you can layer highlights and stuff better if you use a separate layer. But for this, I really want to just kind of blend in this look here with it. So let me just kind of rough shape in this and see. And so again, I'm getting some nice streaks and texture, and it gives me that really awesome barnwood look and feel for the underpainting. So now I've got that, so I need to do the exact same thing with the roof. Let me just grab this. I need to bring this out just a little bit because of where that overhang is going to be. So the nice thing is with the selection tool, I can do that just like so. And then come back and click. So now I have this selected, and I can start laying in the color. So I want kind of an orangish rust color, so I'm going to grab this kind of brownish orange kind of color for it and kind of streak it in as well, like so. And again, same thing, it's just going to grab some of that ink, it's going to smear it. This is going to be an old rusty roof, so having those streaks as the foundation works really well. Notice how I changed my direction of my brush strokes because I want these streaks to kind of follow the direction of the roof itself. So that is important to kind of keep an idea of what you're going to do with that, and have it kind of laid out. You know what, let's cut and paste this real quick. I'm going to put this on a separate layer so I can work on it by itself. So now I've got the roof on one layer, I've got the barn on one layer, I've got the background on one layer, and I've got the clouds on one layer. So let me kind of streak this in a little bit, play around, so it gives me an idea of where I want stuff. Okay. Alright, so now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to need to make trees. Alright, so I've got another layer. And I'm going to use my stencils for this, for the trees. You can use that stencil pack that you can get on Gumroad. It has tree stencils in it that you can use for these. And just really the nice thing about stencils is that you can kind of set them up here and get an idea of where your trees are going to be and how they're going to be, like what size and placement. So it lets you play around with the composition to get something that you want, and you can kind of get them stacked in here and get an idea again of where they're going to be and how they're going to lay out with the barn. I know I want this to be around some trees and bushes, like it's just kind of in an old neglected barn that nature's kind of growing up around and into. So that'll give me a kind of a look for some mid-ground trees and maybe a little bit of a foreground tree for the bigger one, that ash tree on the left, and an idea of where it's going to be. So I want one more, but this one I want kind of really, yeah, kind of like this, because I don't want it to be, basically I'm thinking for the end here, I want it to, is it going to be something that's just a giant bush, or is it going to be an actual tree, or what? And so I'm thinking more of a giant bush kind of thing, kind of like this. So now I've got all these laid out here, and can really see I get a feel for the composition that I want and to play around with. And so then from here, it's just a matter of start filling in some of the trees and stuff with the background and getting it taken care of. So with this right here, I'm using one of my custom brushes. They're Again, any of the brushes and the custom ones that are textured, you can use to start doing this. And that's where you can get a real good idea of how it should look as far as the rough shapes and stuff like that, because this first part should be a little bit more solid. One thing with these stencils, the way these are designed, is that these are going to leave a little bit of gaps here and there, because a tree should have more light showing through it than a bush should, because they're not going to be solid. But once I get some of the rough paint kind of layered in here and taken care of, then all I got to do is just hide this, and it's still there, so I can pull it back when I want it, and it hasn't moved, but now I don't have to worry about it affecting the other stencil that I have. And so again, let me just kind of rough this in, get a feel for it. I know I'm going to put some grass in the front, so I'm not going to worry about the trunk and everything too much. I just want to get kind of a feel for this. And then just go to stencil options and hide all stencils. Boom. So now those stencils are still there, they're just hidden, and I don't have to worry about them. But if I want to bring them back to refine the shape or whatever, then I can do so. So I'm just going to keep kind of putting in some color and some underpainting here. So I'm just going to keep scrubbing this in. So now that gives me an idea of where that's going to be. So I need to do a little bit of midtones here. So let me just kind of scrub in some yellowish, kind of a muddy mustard green yellow. It honestly makes me think of what a color I used to call baby poop yellow. So anyway, sorry. But yeah, just kind of scrubbing it in so that you can see it's a little bit different from the background of those trees. It's another layer coming forward, but not as dark as these bushes. So it doesn't really detract from it. It just kind of adds that feeling of distant grasses and bushes and stuff like that. So I'm just going to keep underpainting here and scrubbing in and getting the feel for where this stuff should be laid out. Okay, now that I've got some of the highlights kind of hinted at back there, I'm going to put some more bushes here in the front. Again, still just underpainting, using a bush brush that I made and just kind of scrubbing in where it would be. There are several other brushes and the custom brushes you can use. But getting a feel, this is going to start setting the barn into the picture, you know, and letting it kind of be seen. But you can see by putting that light green on the right there, that gives the feeling of sunlight hitting in the background. Doesn't have to be anything more than that. It's just, again, it's the impression of what's going on. But I need to start laying in some other highlights and stuff here and there. So I'm going to take some of this green, this yellowish green from the background, and use it to kind of lay in some beginnings of highlights here and there for these trees. trees for me, and trees and rocks really, I can overthink them if I'm not careful, and so, which means I'm sure you guys can do the same. So look at pictures of trees and the way the light hits them, the way it bounces across them. Get a good feel for it, because the tendency is to try and really clump these up, but I want to build up the layers. So I'm going to go with a darker and then a little bit lighter yellowish color, and then a green on top of that, and then maybe push some blue back into the shadowy areas, but really just trying to get those masses of color in there to start building it up. So they take time. And so basically my point here is, if you're like me, you can get very frustrated with this part and want to stop because there are times that it just doesn't seem to. Let me pull these stencils back. And the nice thing there is I can hide stencils. Sorry, I'm getting distracted trying to tell you something while I'm painting. So they can get just frustrating, because it's kind of a push and pull game of constantly going back and forth and adding a little bit, taking a little bit off, adding a little bit, taking a little bit off. And that's what trying to do here is kind of keep painting this in and getting a feel for it. I really need to zoom in. So push through it, give yourself that freedom to push through and play with it. And really try to get the mass shapes first, and then we can go in and add detail on top of that. Now, that's really kind of the key for doing all of this, is just building up those mass areas, and then from there we can start adding in different texture to really give that impression of, hey, here's a tree with a bunch of different leaves. And that's done just by what I'm doing right now is just expanding the size of the brush, so I get these larger speckles of color. And sometimes like this, I find I need to create a few more layers and play around with where the light is hitting it and the clumps and the masses of it. The nice thing about the stencil is it keeps me in line, and I can erase real quick all these overpaints. So by the way, if you get overspray like I just did, you can either, if you're working on a layer by itself, you can just erase it. But if you're worried about painting on an area that you couldn't erase, you can just select the stencil, like, with the selection tool, and it won't paint outside of it. Okay, let me hide this one, get a better look for it. Zoom out. It's not too bad. I'll come back to it. Let me do a little bit over here to kind of keep consistent. That's another thing while you're painting. Move around on your painting. Don't just stay in one spot. You'll overpaint that one area. So move around. Take a look at different things that are going on. Get a good feel for it. Again, erase if you overspray. I don't do that a whole lot, so that's why I'm not bothering to select it. Plus, I'm on a layer by itself, so I'm not worried about it. So just kind of keep getting an idea for where the light's hitting, where the shadows are hitting, and let me do that. All right, so pay attention to how the light is going to come across through the barn. So see, I'm not painting all the highlight on this because that barn is going to shadow some of it. And kind of the same for some of the bushes here. Do this right here. Okay, so add in a couple of just random spritzes. This, if I was using a bristle brush, like for regular painting, I would just be tapping into it and getting these kind of shapes. And that's kind of what I'm doing here, is just tapping into this so I can get the I don't want a solid spray. I just want spatters of color. Excuse me. All right, so a little bit of that done in. All right. And yeah, it's coming together. It'll get there. So let's try to do some of this green down here. So I need to set this in a little more for the base. So I'm going to have to start doing some of the grass kind of in the front here in a minute. But there is some of this that I want to spritz just a little bit more on and mess a little bit more with. So, but I'm going to go ahead and do the grass because otherwise I'm going to overwork these bushes. So let me grab a little bit of this green from here and change it just slightly. So this is old brush. There are a couple of ones, again, in custom brush. I just need a streaky brush. So I'm going to paint on this, make a new layer here, and for the grass to go over top of this green layer and start doing some just kind of vertical-ish strokes. Okay, I'm just scrubbing in paint. I'm going to switch between yellows and greens and so forth while I'm doing this. So I'm just going to scrub this in to start laying the under painting for what's going to be my grass. So you want this to be really messy. Okay, so that gets the grass kind of scrubbed in. Now let's do a little bit of other work here, and I think really probably want to get started on doing some of the barn work. So let's try and start pulling that in a little bit. I'm going to switch to the pencil tool, and I want to start kind of putting in some of the details here with maybe some doors, some windows, stuff like that. So start sketching it in. Again, this is an older rusty barn, so I want it to, I'm not worried about straight up and down angles. I want it to kind of look like, you know, the doors falling in, and that there's you know, it's just kind of at that stage where it's gonna have issues. So a lot of that is really just kind of roughly sketching in where stuff you want it to be. You can do the boards first. You can do the, you know, like where the windows and that kind of stuff are going to be first. Because the nice thing about this is you can paint over all of this, so it doesn't hurt it to sketch on top of stuff like this. So, and get an idea. So a lot of these old barns would have a main door. They'd have a hayloft entrance. At least I know ours did. And so we kind of got some of that going on here, and you know, just an idea of the way things should be laid out. So really just going to sketch in some of this stuff, and then I'll start adding shadows and start adding in some ideas of where it is, and then start adding in boards and all that kind of stuff. So really just, you know, feel free to sketch over it. If you're worried about being on the main layer, you know, right now I'm sketching on top of the color I laid down because I can kind of blend all this into it, so I'm not overly worried about it. But if you're worried about it, then just simply sketch on the layer above it, and that way you can really play around with it. Okay, so got that there. I'm going to kind of fade some of this down. Just going to blend the color here. So this palette knife, it kind of smears and goes into it. So zoom in a little bit here first, so that you get not so much that blurred look, but instead just kind of where the shadows or water or stuff ran down. And you kind of have to sometimes play with the pressure and play with those stuff. It kind of depends, but usually if it's just, you know, a rough blend, it'll do it fairly well and get you some of that beginning streaks and stuff. And like I've said a million times before, and I'll say a million times again, paintings are just about building up textures and giving that impression of stuff that's there. So that's really what I'm doing right here. Alright, so just kind of put this in here, a little bit of this here. And again, these lines, you know, you can use control like I'm doing to make them straight if you've got your pencil width set correctly on how you want it, the gaps. But again, this is an old barn, so I'm not worried about if it's all completely the same size, if it's completely the same distance, and so forth. So just really trying to lay them in so that it will look like, when zoomed out to a normal viewing point, that it's just a series of old boards hanging there. So that's the key thing with this. So just, you know, lay them in as you want, keep them as straight and as even as you want, and then from there we'll start adding in some more shadows and so forth. So the key thing here to remember is that, you know, you want the, like on this door, it's kind of going back, and then once you get that, you can start lightly sketching in some of the shadows. If it helps and you want a distinct shadow, you can lay it out with the line here. Oops, that's a little dark. You can kind of lay it out across it to where you want it to be, and just try some different things. So that was a little loose, a little too narrow. You know, there's different ways to play with this. You can try it like this, like I'm doing, to give yourself that rough thing here. You could also, you know, we could add another layer and set the blend mode to either overlay or to multiply, or you can just grab a darker color and like I've got here, and then lay it in how you want for where it to be, and then use the palette knife to blend it over the layer without actually worrying about messing up what was below it. So I need to darken behind this bush because that's going to have a shadow. Okay. I don't know if that one's working too well. Let me try this one. Red out smudge. Yeah, it's a little bit better. I kind of like that. Yeah. Let me blur this a little bit there. Soften that edge so that shadow is blending over. That's a little better. I'm going to adjust the hue here. You do Control J to get to this. I'm just going to change it slightly here. Make it a little more on the blue side. Yeah, it's not too bad. And then I'll change this blend mode. And like I was saying before, you can go to overlay, which gives you one kind of look. You can also go to multiply, which gives you another kind of look. So, now because these custom brushes pick up color, I can use it for my softening here a little bit, kind of getting it play out a little bit. That's a little too dark. Try this. That's a little too dark too. And let me try this. Not exactly what I want, so a little bit lighter. Change the opacity here to. That is the thing with the blend modes. You got to be. It's going to change a lot of stuff, so you really got to kind of play around to get what you want first. Yeah. So let me soften this. And I'll come back to that. Oops. All right, so really this is just starting that refinement process of laying in some of the shadows, the straight lines, and that kind of stuff. You can just build it up this way. I guess I really could have done that differently. The nice thing about kneaded erase is that it's softer. It takes off less at a time. So it lets you kind of push and pull, and you can kind of pull out highlights from where that would be. So again, it gives it kind of that weathered look to it, which I think adds to the character of it. So I'm just going to keep going here. Yeah. So in your shadows, make sure to add like some blues and some purples. That's looking pretty good. Alright, back to the pencil. Kind of like it for sketching in some of these shadows as well. A little bit more control. Yeah. So now that I've got some of the shadows, let's sketch in some highlights, maybe some windowsills kind of stuff looking here. So again, just paint over it and define it. That's why I wasn't overly worried about the lines going through everything, because I can just paint right over it and push it back to where I want. Just like so. So just kind of keep adding in where I think some of the sunlight might creep across it and hit it and give it a little bit of pop. You know, and it could be just because one board is sticking out a little more, or it's leaning a little forward, leaning a little back. But by putting it on this door, for example, you can see how it's kind of making that front bottom kind of kick towards you a little bit because it feels like it's sticking out. So. Alright, and just kind of keep going through here, doing all this. So see how by constantly going in and putting a little bit of texture here, a little bit of texture there, a little bit more here, a little bit of shadow, a little bit of light, and leaving stuff, it really helps to start giving it that little bit of realism, a little bit of impressionism. So it kind of reaches that point that I think is really cool looking. Okay, just add a little here. And some here. Yeah, I think that's starting to come together really well. Just kind of keep plugging away on it. Okay, so yeah, I think that barn's getting pretty well done. I need to start on some of the other parts of the painting. I still need to work on the trees and work on the roof, but zooming out, I think that reads pretty well. Yeah, okay. So now let's kind of get started on the roof a little bit and pushing and pulling it with some highlights and with some shadows. So a lot of the same things that I was just doing with the barn, I'm just going to repeat here, and stepping up the gradient, the value just a little bit, and can even play around with some here. Now I just locked the transparency there so I can sketch across it and I don't have to worry about the edges. So it gives me a lot more freedom to just play and not really worry about it. So I'm just drag this down with the marker tool. The marker tool works great for adding like streaks and adding just that overlayer of streaky color. And I'm not using a setting. I just, whatever you click on, it's just the default. It pulls up first before you select an actual preset. So that's what I'm doing here. Just using that. So, all right. So I'll select here, put a little bit brighter. This will kind of set for where the sun is really hitting the roof. Kind of some on the top. And that's the great thing about this is that, even as I soften it and kind of smear these colors around, I can leave it streaky. I don't have to try to overly blend it. In fact, I don't want to overly blend it, because if I do, I'm just going to lose that feel of old rusty roof where water has run down it and that kind of stuff. So let me just kind of keep going here and blending this down and around and adding some highlights. Okay, now that I've got some of the highlights kind of finishing up here, I want to add in some streaks of dark. And so this is really how you start building up that texture for old metal, is just adding in some lights and darks where rust got a little bit darker and so forth. And this is a kind of a corrugated tin roof that I'm painting, so I want to keep that streakiness and everything going in the same direction. That gives that feeling of the slant to that roof. So, just kind of keep plugging away at it and doing highlights and darkens and so forth and streaking across it. Okay, so I think this is starting to get some really cool look to it. Not finished yet by any means, but I think that's a good, still the underpainting to get kind of a real feel to it, and lighting and so forth, kind of really getting all that in there to feel where it's kind of hitting and how it's standing up. But that orange really makes that pop against the cool of the green, so I like how that's looking. It's really kind of pulling your eye to it more. So I really need to think about these trees and getting some of these figured out. Alright, so let's bring the stencils back and hide. Okay. So I really want to work on this one and get a feel for it and how to kind of get it pulled together. Because I can really, if I focus on one, I can kind of replicate it on the other ones because it gives me a direction. So I'm going to work on this one for a few seconds here. So now I've got some of that in there. That bluish color I think really helps with the shadow and popping it and giving it that feel. So let's zoom in. Oops, wrong button. Alright, so need to add some stuff here before I build up any more layers. So I want to add like some limbs in the background. These are a subtle thing that just really helps your eye to see. You know, even though you can't overly see it, your eye does still register it. So having them in there does help. Okay. Let's kind of put a few of these here. All right, not too bad, not too bad. Lighter green. Start trying to play around with some of these better highlights and better parts of the green. So I've got the darks in there, I've got some of the midtones, but I want to scatter in some of this greener color here. And I've got the brush set decent size, so I'm getting these real spattered leaves for a distance. Working with it a little bit larger like this does give the feeling of leaves versus just noise. So that's why I'm doing this. Let's make a new layer, because I think I'm going to need to. Yeah, it's getting kind of full here, so let's make a new layer. And then we'll start adding in some extra highlights. Yeah. And so what I'm trying to do here is, like I was talking about earlier, is not make this all one solid mass. But I still need to get the clumps of leaves correct. And so it's just a matter of building up. And this is honestly, this is the part where I can get frustrated personally with stuff, because I start blending it too much and I feel like, oh, it's never going to come together. But it's just really a matter of persevering and pushing through it. So if you find yourself getting frustrated, just keep going. Remember to get your darks down, get your midtones down, and then from there start adding in clumps of highlights for it and everything like this. Okay, so I've added some, some of the highlights and stuff like that. So what I'm going to do now is make a new layer. And just by clicking right here on Add Layer. And then what I'm going to do is select here. And on this layer, the new one I made, I'm going to change the blend mode. I'm going to change it to Overlay. So now I'm going to grab a kind of a orangish color, a lighter orangish color. And with it set as overlay, and with my airbrush, I'm going to airbrush in some of that onto the upper left where the light would be coming from. And then that will give me, that kind of that pop, that highlight to it. So let me play around with that for a minute. And then I'm going to take this blue and kind of do the same down here, because it's going to give a blue tint to the shadow area right through here. So darken that just a little bit. Okay, so it's a very subtle thing, but you can see a little bit of the blue that's coming in there and kind of hitting on the shadows for it. It just kind of helps make the stuff pop. And that way you can really kind of see some difference for it. So now I can take that same orange color and just kind of lay it across again and get that really nice play of color. So see how that really kind of helps it pop and feel like the sun's really hitting it and going across it. So then you can just merge that down. And then, okay, I think we're going to need to play around with these other trees and bushes a little bit more. So let's go up here to stencils, show all stencils again. Now I'm going to invert this one to protect it, and then work on these pretty much the exact same way. So I'll add in some more texture. With some of those green leaves, like so. And just kind of keep doing the same thing here. So essentially repeating the process that I just did. Okay, so now we've got a lot of stuff tightened up on here, but let's try to maybe get some of this foreground done. So let's switch to the grass layer. And we've got it kind of laid out right now where, you know, the darker grass is towards you, and then you've got the mid-tone and some lighter stuff. And we need to kind of work on that. I'm going to put a little bit of detail back here and some here with this brush right here. So all I'm doing is it's that same old brush, streaky, just kind of laying in a little bit more variation to break this up a little bit. And that way it lays the foundation, because remember, this is still the underpainting. Okay, so this isn't complete for the grass yet. And there are some grass brushes out there that you can use. I don't really like them. They're too repetitive, too stamped. So I think you're better off to kind of start building your layers this way, where you start off with a main color, add in some streaks here and there to kind of give that background texture and really start building this out. So that's what I'm doing here, kind of laying in where the light would be hitting, where the dark would be hitting, and so forth. So now, once I have some of that, you know, we can start to really play around with some of the other stuff. And some of the best ways to do this is either with the pencil or the ink tool, and playing around that way. So let me show you a little bit here for each, so that way you can kind of see how it's going to go. And just really kind of throw in the different strands, if you will, or blades of grass. You know, again, there are brushes that'll do grass brush, but to me they just look too even. You know, this is wild grass, so you're going to have, unless it's all kind of blowing in one direction, and even when it's doing that, you're going to have part of it that's not blowing, part that is. If you've ever seen wind blow across a field, you can see it in waves as it goes across. So anyway, the main point is start with your lighter color, and then start laying in some of these swatches of or swipes of grass as it's going, and move around so that it's all over the place, and it really starts laying in. And unlike fur tends to go one direction, grass doesn't, so you'll want to kind of move it all around and everything else like that, and really kind of you know, get a feel for this, as crazy as it is, and moving around and stuff like that. And you can do this on different layers. I'm doing it on this one, and then what I'm going to do is, you'll notice the bottom of these are kind of stark where they come out. So just by taking one of the old brushes, you can blend it down, or you can use a palette knife and kind of blend the tips, the bottom tips, into the grass below, so that it kind of looks like it's emerging from it. And it's just a matter of kind of repeating this process, starting with the light, then switching to a mid-tone, and then finally switching to a dark, and kind of going around and using, like I said, the pencil or the pen tool. So that's what I'm going to be doing here, is just kind of keep going with this. So really not a whole lot to explain other than what I just did. So let's go through it. Okay, so now that I've got some of those, I'm going to start using this darker color and put it in, and have some of them kind of fold over, you know, like maybe something stepped on them. Really kind of move it around and you know, just kind of keep building and building and going with layers. And then once you get more of these mid-tones and darker ones in, just keep selecting from it like I'm doing here. You'll see I hit Alt and select. And it's really just a matter of get your rhythm of doing it. Try not to keep it all going the same direction. I have a tendency to swipe from the bottom left to the up right. So make yourself do straight up and down ones that go back. But I'm also using this compositionally because I've noticed how I have all the blades kind of pointing subtly towards the middle. That's a compositional thing, so that way I can draw the eye in more. It's almost like arrows pointing, look at the barn. So think about that as you're doing it too. And I want some of these perspective-wise to, again, I want this to feel like you're laying in grass and looking at the barn. Like maybe you were out here walking, you sat down, you're just trying to look at it. And so I'm going a little bit higher up than it would be like if I were standing there looking. So this is some tall grass. It's probably would be waist high even. And just trying to build that up and get the feel for it. So, you know, just kind of keep going through some of this. And then again, softening the bottoms so that they blend into the grass below. But you can see how by doing that streaky color behind it and then doing these blades of grass in front of it, it really does build that texture and build that feeling of a lot of blades of grass, a lot of depth of grass. And so that's why I'm doing it this way. Okay, so now that we've got that worked on a little bit, let's jump over here to these bushes that are a little neglected. So make sure we're on the right layer, and it's essentially exactly what we were doing before with the trees, just more dense. Okay, so I'm going to start adding in some highlights and adding in some shadows and stuff here as well. But this is one of those things with working on layers that works really well, is because you can kind of bounce around a little bit as you get it done. And again, we're not at the final stages yet, even at this point. So as I'm adding this in, what's that? Okay, so you need to be thinking about what are your final touches going to be and stuff like that. And that's why I'm keeping this a few more layers, even more than I normally work with. Part of the reason for that, like I mentioned before, is just so that if you're not used to, okay, that's right. All right. So if you're not used to this painting like this, it just makes it easier to work on a few more layers. But same process as far as like painting the trees, just a little more dense. But this way I can go around, get everything kind of pulled together and gradually bring it together to get more of a coherent look. And then from here, I'll just start adding in some of the details and the final bits on it. But again, you want to work all over a painting to make sure that you're kind of pulling it all together at different spots. And really, if there's one part that you're getting frustrated with, go work on a different part of it. That's why I didn't work on these bushes right away, because working on the trees kind of frustrates me sometimes. So I go work on the grass, or the grass may frustrate me, so I'll go work on the barn. And then once I get the grass kind of done, it may inspire me to go work back on the bushes again. So I come back here and work on the bushes like this. So again, just let it kind of keep your energy going and moving forward. So, you know, all right, so it gets that one side done. Now you need to catch this side up to it. Again, just adding in some shadow, and highlight the exact same way I did the other. Just paying attention to what would be kind of hidden by the barn and what would really stick out. So, and it's just the impression of leaves and impression of details. But really, if we zoomed in all the way on this, there's not a lot of detail. You know, it's just random leaves. So, all right, let's see. So that's a little more pulled together. I'm going to add some sticks and twigs and stuff like that sticking out. Do some of that here. Some of them, and some small trees. It's just those little things to give your eyes something to register as, you know, parts of the whole. And that kind of is, yeah. So zooming out, yeah, that's reading pretty well. Okay, so let's play around a little bit more with this grass. First, let me double check. Okay. Not too bad, not too bad. So, here, let's start to soften some of these. There's some of these things that I see here that I kind of missed. So this is where you want to kind of go in and look at stuff and get a feel. Does everything look right? Does it look varied enough? Does it look like it's not just floating in, out there and stuff? So you really want to play around a little bit more with some overlapping of the midtones and dark here and there. So it'll really set stuff back. Yeah, kind of like that. By the way, I can't remember if I said it or not, but to move the canvas, you just press spacebar and click on the canvas and it slides it around. That's how I'm moving it. Alright, so I think that's reading pretty well. So merge all that down. Okay. So now I've entered the point where I'm going to start putting some icing on this cake and really trying to mess around with it. One of the main things is on this roof, for example, I don't want that really crisp straight line. That just reads as computer done to me. So I want this to be more natural. This would be like if I was painting a painting and I left my charcoal lines, from where I drew it on the canvas. It just wouldn't look right. So what I'm going to do is just start, painting a little bit extra stuff here, but I'm going to do it on a layer on top. And with the pencil tool, I can go in and really start messing this around and just really alt select the color and just keep working around this and breaking up this straight line. So I'm going to keep doing that. Alright, so go along the roof here, same kind of thing, breaking it up, just kind of getting rid of that straight line. Now here on the front, I want to kind of get rid of some of that instead of adding to it like I was on the other. So I can take this black and go in, and even up here on this roof part, maybe put some holes. A lot of these roofs have spots in them that have kind of broken through, or it's rusted through and fallen in. So add some of that there. Some highlights, bending it over. And really, again, just Alt-click, select some of the surrounding color, break up the line, make it more interesting, make it twisted and turned, really kind of paint it in. And by selecting from the painting as I'm going around, it makes it much more natural looking. So just pay attention to where your light's coming from, like I'm doing here, and just kind of take parts out, add parts back, jump around the piece, and try to really pay attention to how that metal is going to hang over it. And really, this is fun. Just I enjoy this part. These details, this frosting, this is kind of where it all comes together, and this is what really excites me for doing this. So again, enjoy this part. Really play around with it, and if you've got it on a separate layer, like I do, you really can play around with it. You're not messing anything up. You can always undo or erase any of it. So enjoy this part. But the key thing here is just to break up any of those really crisp, hard edges so they're more organic. And I can add in some shadow down through here. And bring this out. Hang over. this up a little bit. Okay. Maybe, yeah, you know, I'm gonna add a hole here where you can see the clouds behind it. So just a little bit of cloud color, a little bit of maybe you can see a board peeking through back there. Kind of have that, and bring down some cracks. And let's break that up, yeah. Nice. Kind of like, yeah. That's looking good. I'm telling you, this is the fun. This is what it's all worth right here. Seeing it all kind of pull together. And that's why I was saying, you know, really keep pushing yourself through those parts that you struggle with. Embrace those struggles. Do something else on the other part of the picture to get yourself through it. And then just really keep... Yeah, I'm going to break this off here. Nice. I think I like that, yeah. But just really keep pushing yourself to go to the fun part, you know, which is this part right here. Okay, so if that board's coming out, I should add. I'll come back to it. Yeah, let's just take that back off. Make it look like a board just sticking out. Yeah, there we go. That's better. Better bit of detail. Some more cracks, crevices, all this fun stuff. So like I said, these would be corrugated tin. So it would have some bottom parts of it that would overlap almost like giant tiles. So maybe add in some of those here and there as well. And then some streaks to represent the ridges and the valleys. Again, I don't want to get overly detailed with that part, but I want to have enough detail here so that you really can see the, you know, the feel and the character for it. Let's add, kind of like I was talking about, let's add where there would be a layer of tin here. So maybe sketch in some under part. Wonder how I'm gonna do this. Sorry, kind of pausing here for a second, guys. I want to figure out what I'm gonna put here, how I'm gonna lay it out. Okay, so let's see this new layer. Take a little bit of this color and let's kind of streak in some of these ridges first. It's going to give me a little bit better idea. Yeah, there we go. And then just kind of keeping these soft. You can do the control, but see, that's the problem. If you do the control by itself like that, it's going to give you that really strict line. So don't. Just try to do it by hand. Then it's going to come out looking so much better. Okay, so okay, that gives me a little bit more of the idea of the vertical, so now I can lay in some of this horizontal I was talking about a second ago. And I want this to be a squiggly line, because again, those corrugators are kind of up and down, so this will just kind of give that feeling of it. And I'm going to put a little bit more of a hole here. I think that's just adds a lot of character. Yeah. So just gonna paint some sky color, paint some of the tree color. And boom, we've got a hole. It just adds so much to these barns. Alright, so back to this. Let me put a little shadow here to show this is overlapping. Just like that. Like that. Okay. Alright, so now that I've got that kind of in here, smudge it out a little bit just to soften it. Alright, so now I think what we need to do is kind of, yeah, that's cool. I like how that looks. Alright, so let's add some highlights to this area and kind of make this pop a little bit more. Yeah, take that little chunk here first. That negative space is such an important thing. I think that looks cool like that. Alright, now let's maybe add in just a little bit of striations. Okay. Yeah. Again, I'm just hitting Alt, just like from the canvas itself, and working zoomed out so I can see how it looks. Alright, now let's add a little bit of highlights here and there. Because this is what's going to make this pop even more. Because we've got a lot of cool colors, so this warm color is going to pull us right here in the middle. So adding some highlights along here. Here, to places where it's really going to catch the sun. Now remember this, it's rusted metal, so it's not going to be super reflective. In other words, it's not going to have a whole lot of reflective qualities to it. So you can't get overly bright with it. We just kind of have to lay in some softer highlights, if you will. So I'm just going to keep doing this here and here and keep going. So now that's looking pretty good. Let's add in a little bit of breaks here and there to this side, just so it's not so straight. And maybe some more pushing on the shadow parts here too, just to kind of give that a little bit more character. Okay, yeah, it's kind of good. Let's zoom out. Yeah, starting to really pull it all together now. So let's a bit more on these bushes. Yeah, a little bit more on that. Okay, so I'm going to switch to the sticker sheet, and there is a crow one in here. So I'm going to use this and make a new layer, and then just randomly throw in some crows here, and like so. Now I'm going to erase them and keep some of the ones I like, because this throws in some weird images here and there. So the easiest thing is really just to throw in a spray of them and get the different angles that you want, and then just erase out the ones you don't. And then from here, what I usually do is just take the selection tool, select around it, and then Control-Shift-Alt-T will allow you to transform it, twist it, turn it, angle it differently so it doesn't, because this one that I'm working on right now is really the same one as that other one, just at a different turn. So I want it to be similar, so it's, you know, same type birds, but it's at a different angle. So, and we'll change this one too. So, same thing, Control-Shift-Alt-T, rotate, and now I have two birds that look like they may have scared up out of it. And select them both now, because I don't want them this big and prominent. So, same thing, change their size. Control D, deselects. We want to change the opacity too, so that they're really just subtle. They're kind of just there in the distance. So I don't want them to, like I said, I don't want them to detract from the barn. And now that I've got that, I'll just duplicate it. And I'm going to move these around. Again, same thing. I'm going to move these and change them and twist them, so that's all I'm going to be doing here. I'll do this a couple times to change the opacity and that kind of stuff. So. Alright, so there is another flowers sticker sheet here as well, so you can kind of do the same thing and just tap in some flowers. Of course, it helps if you select the right color. Let's look what this looks like as orange. It's okay. I think what I'll do, because even with the change opacity, I don't know, those are just standing out too much. So let's do this. Let's select the layer, and I'm going to zoom in, and now I'm going to make these, I'm going to make these into daisies. I think white flowers kind of fits this better than these orange bright ones. I'll still throw some other colors in though. Okay, so it's not too bad like that. You can use really any tool that you want here. Pencil's not too bad. Kind of gives a little texture, that's why I'm trying it out. I think I might switch though. Yeah. So really, I mean, oil brush is fine. You just paint it in real quick. It gives you a little bit of texture to them too. Yeah, let's just turn all these white, and then I'm going to go back and add a yellow dot. Pen tool works great for this. You just tap in a dot, gives you that yellow center section. So it's not bad at all. Yeah. I think that looks good. So now this is one of those things I would normally do in multiple layers if I hadn't, how I used to do it. So now I can do it like this just as easily and go in and tap all these. But I'm not going to leave these like this. So I'll show you another reason why I put this on its own layer is so I can do some different stuff here. First, let me get this changed. Okay. Now, I'm going to erase through them so that you can put blades of grass in front of them, like so, and it really seats them into the image. So I'm just going to go through this real quick and do this on these. Okay, I think I forgot to mention, I just switched to Particle Snow Custom Brush. That's one of the standard custom brushes. And I'm using this blue color in the background to kind of softly add in some blue spots here and there. Again, it's one of those subtle things that your brain will register as depth
because it's going in so softly. But it will, it just helps be there. So, and then adding in some of these white ones here now, I think works good too, because it gives a pop. I might add some bread. See how that looks. I like the snowflakes, by the way, because it really is a random splotch of color. Yeah, let's go a little bit bigger. Yeah. So now I got that complementary color going on, and really pops it. So I get all these kind of laid in. But the white ones, I like the spatter of white ones too here and there, along with these reds. Yeah. Now just erase some of them back so that the blades of grass are in front of them and they're not all laying on top of the blades. So I'm just clean this up a little bit. Okay, everybody, I think we're getting this is getting close to being done. So just a few little things here, but I think all in all, we've got some really nice composition. It pulls everything to the inside. So let me move some of these so we can see it a little bit better. The grass kind of pulls your vision into it. The lighting of the orange roof kind of pulls you into it. So, and you feel like you're in the grass and everything else, but you can see how it comes together. So just keep pushing through, and eventually you'll get you get the painting to come together. But I think this works. So questions and comments, guys, leave them below, and I will definitely do what I can to answer them. But I hope you learned a lot from this 2-hour workshop. Thanks.